Gun control. I was 13, and under the Christmas tree, there was a big wrapped triangular box. I began to slowly circle around the ribbons and bright paper. I didn't let myself think what it could be. Didn't want to let myself in for that kind of surprise. A life-changing surprise. Everyone was there opening presents. That always seemed a difficult time. My mother put it all together. Tree, decorations, Santa preparations for the little ones, fire in the hearth, lights all over the yard. The place was a wonderland, inside and out. My father seemed to share no joy, but witnessed the events with a sour expression. And when one of us made eye contact with him, he'd manufacture a difficult smile, nodding as if in accord with the merriment, which he was not. I think the whole scene hurt him, and only highlighted and recalled his miserable life and childhood. I had always wanted a rifle, a gun of my own, to have and to hold. Always been fascinated with weapons, guns in particular, but all weapons, both esoteric and conventional. I wanted an air rifle. I didn't think I was going to get one. My mother was sometimes set against these things. But it seemed to me a boy needed some kind of a weapon. All of us walked around the woods with bows and arrows, hunting knives on our sides, jackknives in our pockets. A boy can't really be a boy without at least a knife. We all had them, and used them regularly and skillfully from the time we were 9 years old, as well as BB pistols and rifles. The most common brand of BB weaponry was Daisy. Sweetest name for a BB gun, and even had its own fan magazine. The Daisy Red Ryder was the champ of BB rifles, which I coveted for the longest summers. I wanted one, but truly, I wanted something more. I wanted a mighty air rifle. My friends either had the Daisy Powerline pistols or Red Ryder rifles. These worked with a CO2 cartridge in the handle or the stock and had room in them for dozens of BBs, and when you pull the trigger, a burst of air from the CO2 cartridge would let fly BBs as many times as you pulled the trigger. I didn't own one, but I got to play with my friends' guns. They were fun and could hurt you, even so much as to lodge under the top layer of skin, and you'd have to squeeze or pop it out some way. This would usually only happen to the chubbier, and therefore slower kids in these insane games we'd play. This one game was played in the backyards and the woods. One kid would have to take off his shirt, and then a couple of other guys with guns would give him to the count of 5 with their eyes closed before starting to hunt him down. He had to run zigzag while screaming hideous war cries from fear and to throw the shooters off. There's nothing funnier and more worrisome than seeing a shirtless maniac racing through brambles, bushes, and into trees, serpentine, with death and revenge on his mind. There was no shooting at the face, but the runner got hit more than half the time. It was like a bee sting, but hurt less, because there was no real poison. But the prey would almost lose his identity to the shooters, almost become inhuman, almost hated, in a way that can be very natural for boys. Boys. What can you say about us, really? Lord of the Flies, by William Golding, contained a lot of layers, a lot of truth. In our game, the hunted could hide if quick enough and attack, firing back with rocks and dirt if he was cornered or hit repeatedly. We'd let off on the kid only when he'd yell, "I yield! I yield!" Very fancy talk for us primitives. since we were essentially dirty, skinny, rabid little wood roaches. Me, I wanted something more than a BB gun. Wanted to penetrate the skin, pierce it, and draw blood. Something that could halt somebody in his tracks. Real stopping power. Something of importance and authority. I wanted a big one. As big as I could get away with. A tough kid, like a big, older kid, could get a lot of respect. But an air rifle like I wanted, everybody respects that. A pellet gun that could penetrate the skin and stay in. Buried deeply in a tree till you can only see the back circle of the silver pellet. Aha! Now you're talking. So there, under the Christmas tree, I dove for the long triangular box, hoping. As soon as I opened the wrapping and saw the large zippered leather case, I knew it was some type of rifle, and not one of my father's golf clubs or a broom wrapped to look like one, which would not be unlike my mother to do, wrap a broom for a joke, and then give me a fancy rifle squirt gun to make up for it. She and her evil sister would serve bear meat to my very food-finicky uncle and tell him it was beef, or blood pudding to me, saying it was a special chocolate dessert. It was nauseating to learn the truth, so you never knew what you were going to get with her. But it was an air rifle, the best, one I only dreamed of from drawings and pictures in the back of comics where the Benjamin 397 air rifle by Crossman was sometimes advertised. Dear God, it was the very Benjamin I'd always wanted. All beautiful wood, variable pump compression, bolt action, holds one shiny pointed pellet, enough power to kill varmints, or so it advertised. Throw the bolt after inserting the pellet, and then fire at will. And speaking of whom, poor fucking Will LeBeau was often a target of the Daisy BB crowd. But he would never be a victim of the Benjamin, I thought. You wouldn't want to shoot a friend with the Benjamin. Not Will LeBeau, not Louis Rickey, certainly not Stephen White, not even some of the big kids in the neighborhood who we were scared of and who were sometimes cruel to little kids and animals. Certainly not after a few pumps. You'd be in the Daisy League with one pump, maybe. But after more than 3 pumps, you're in the OK Corral shootout alongside Wyatt Earp. 15 or 20, and you're in Rat Patrol, nailing krauts at 50 yards. I was so excited, I began staggering around the living room like a drunk, thanking everybody and tripping over wrapping paper and boxes and showing it to my siblings, who said it was cool, but were barely able to look up from the greed trance of their own presents. My sister had practically crawled into Barbie's dream house at this point. Mikey was shooting plastic wiffle ball pucks around with his new hockey stick and gloves, and Joey, the baby, was crying because he probably peed in his pants, was overwhelmed and confused, and my mother had to talk him down a few times, quieting him with one of the Santa cookies which my father had been eyeing. I was walking around in a daze. If I had opened the next present, which was a huge tube holding hundreds of silver pellets, I could have well shot myself in the foot just to end the fierceness of the joy. It was too much for me to bear. Ma was looking at me and smiling at my happiness from the corner, with her lap half full of crappy bullshit kid gifts and homemade cards, and never anything from my father, who claimed the house and everything in the house was purchased by him anyway, so it didn't matter what he himself actually bought for anyone. Christmas bulbs must have illuminated his miserable memories of working the entire holiday season for his immigrant parents and maybe getting a box cutter or a salami to go to bed with on Christmas Eve, because they didn't even know what to give him anyway. Here, take this salami. It's yours now." My mother broke my trance by saying, "You have to be very careful with that gun because it's dangerous." And I knew she didn't know anything about it. It was a one-pellet setup, which you had to hand-load each time and pump it for power. It was practically a flintlock. It took half a minute to get it up and running. The only way the unloaded and unpumped rifle was dangerous is if you swung it around like a club and hit people in the head. Then she added, "Always keep it in the carrying case," thinking that without being in the case, it was liable to go off at any time. The case was fleece-lined and mostly for protecting the rifle from being scratched or the stock from being dented or chipped. It's like those knitted socks you see some people put over the heads of their woods in a golf bag with the numbers embroidered into them. They're fine, but not necessary. The rifle was stored in my bedroom closet in its case before I used it for daily practice, which, because it was late December, was mostly done inside. And that brings me to the third related gift, the Crossman pellet trap and target holder. This was one great Christmas. The target and pellet trap was a metal box which was empty, except for a slanted piece of heavy steel inside. Once the pellet went through the paper target, fastened by a clip on the box top, the steel plate deflected the pellet to the bottom of the box without any ricochet. It was perfect for shooting in the basement. I pumped the Benjamin up far more times than required for the 25-foot range I was generally using. But I loved the kick and the sound, and so the pellets would hit the steel slab in the back with enough force to distort them and render them unreusable. I'd take the rifle, cradled in its case, through the living room, as solemn as if I were carrying the baby Jesus or the Holy Grail down to the basement from my bedroom closet every day for the week of vacation and every day for another week after school resumed, practicing in various positions and with a variety of pumps for power. Having been familiar with the Boy Scouts of America Sporting Shooter's Manual, I sat and stood and lay on my belly, aiming for the bullseye. And when I got good in one position, I'd switch. And when I got good at all of them, I'd move further down the cellar until I was hitting pretty close to the center from nearly 40 feet in a variety of positions. I was dying to shoot the walls and the rest of the house up, just to kill it and wreck it, or something. There was a destructive shooter in me somewhere, but I always acted in a safe and responsible way. While Mikey, nearly a decade later, used the same wood-paneled basement wall my pellet trap was set against for real puck shooting practice, and shattered and splintered the panels right through to the 2x4's frame behind them, all with Dad's approval and supervision. Dad didn't care if you wrecked the joint, as long as it was in the service of sports achievement. I wish I had just shot that place full of holes, turned it into the St. Valentine's Day massacre scene. But that wouldn't have been good for me in the end, so I managed to keep the beast at bay. Then one day, I unzipped the rifle in my closet and carried it through the living room to the cellar steps. I carried it the way you're supposed to transfer a live ammo rifle, my wrist curved around the trigger guard, the stock under my arm, bolt open, and the barrel hanging toward the floor. My face solemn like I was taking hold of the cruets at Mass, with hands steady to pour wine and water into the chalice. The rifle relaxed and under my management. It was the exhilarating feeling of control and skillfully executed knowledge and power. I loved weapons and prided myself on knowing how to use all of them: knives, bows and arrows, martial arts, darts, and all edge weapons, skillfully and safely, for fun, and for fantasies of defense and destruction, if ever needed. On the way to my little shooting gallery, where the trap and pellets were stored, my mother noticed me heading toward the cellar steps, and she said, with an edge and tone in her voice that heralded foreboding, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going down to practice." I sensed there was going to be some requirement of compliance and some type of humiliating bossing around of me on the immediate horizon. I felt my stomach tighten and tasted the familiar chemistry of fear and anger emanating from it. "Why isn't it in the case?" she asked with her jaw locked in firing position. I replied, It doesn't need to be in the case. That's really for travel and storage purposes. It's not loaded or pumped or anything. It can't even shoot a blast of air right now." "I don't care," she said, her squint-eyed anger and hunger for control spilling over through her clenched teeth. "Go put it in the case and come back." I did. When I got to the kitchen, intending to continue down the cellar steps, she said, "Give me that gun." She snatched it from me, immediately took it to her bedroom, soon after from the house, and then from my life forever. That was it. I never saw the rifle or heard mention of it again. It was mine for 2 winter weeks. I had been once again broken down inside, humiliated, controlled, emasculated. I didn't let my father know. I almost never let him know about anything like that, because I had learned the consequences of reporting any cruel or abusive behavior were, in the end, as bad as the abuse itself. If I ever did, she would be not only enraged, but betrayed. I was pierced, poisoned, stopped cold, as if the Benjamin had been pumped 100 times and penetrated my skin to the heart of me. Kill the pig, slit her throat, spill her blood.